The room smells like linen and lamp oil, and something older than both, the particular stillness that gathers around a man who knows he is about to die. He is 147 years old. He has lived in Egypt for 17 years, which means he spent 130 years somewhere else, in tents, in deserts, in a land God promised him, but never fully gave him. He has buried a wife he loved, and watched the sons of the wife he did not love outlive almost everything he planned. His name was Jacob once. God changed it to Israel. The change cost him a dislocated hip, which never healed right, which means this man has walked with a limp for most of his adult life. And now he is calling his sons into the room. All 12 of them. One of their names will be carved into the gates of a city that has no night. A city at the end of history, where the walls are jasper and the foundations are sapphire, and the gates never close because there is nothing left to keep out. We will get to those gates, but not yet. For now, there are 12 men standing in a room in Egypt, watching their father lift his hands. This is not a genealogy lesson. This is not a history lecture about ancient tribes and territorial boundaries. This is a mirror. Because these 12 men, with their failures and their gifts and their wounds that never quite healed, represent something the writers of the New Testament, the rabbis of the Talmud, and the philosopher Philo of Alexandria all agreed on. They represent the full range of human souls. Every way a person can fail, every way God can still use that failure. 12 sons, 12 stories, and every single one of them is broken in a different way. Their mother, or their mothers, because there were 4 women involved in this birth story, which is itself a kind of wound, gave them names that meant things. Names tied to tears, to jealousy, to desperate prayers whispered in the dark. In Hebrew, a name is not decoration. A name is a declaration. And Jacob, dying in Egypt, is about to declare something over each of these 12 men that will echo for 3,000 years. Stay with me, because the first name on the list is the one that should have inherited everything, and he threw it all away. Reuben was the firstborn. In the ancient world, that meant everything. The firstborn son received a double portion of the inheritance. He received the authority to lead the family after his father died. He received the blessing, the spoken word of power that, in Hebrew culture, functioned almost like a legal document written into the spiritual fabric of reality. Reuben stood in line to receive all of it. He lost it in a single afternoon. The book of Genesis records it in one brutal sentence. While his father Jacob was still alive, Reuben slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine, the mother of 2 of his brothers. We do not know why. The text does not explain. Perhaps it was a power grab. Perhaps it was grief after his mother Leah was passed over one too many times. Perhaps it was simply a moment of appetite that overrode every warning in his chest. Whatever the reason, Jacob heard about it, said nothing for years, and then, on his deathbed, spoke the verdict with the quiet devastation of a man who had thought about it for a long time. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power. A pause, then, unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence. The Hebrew word is pachaz, reckless, boiling over, uncontained, a vessel with no walls, a river with no banks. Reuben had the capacity for greatness and the fatal inability to govern himself, and so the double portion passed to Joseph, the leadership passed to Judah, and Reuben, preeminent in potential, preeminent in waste, became a tribe that history barely remembers. You may know a Reuben, you may be a Reuben, the person in the room with the most raw ability, who keeps losing ground to the same weakness, the same uncontrolled moment. The tribe of Reuben asks a question that has no comfortable answer. What is ability worth if you cannot govern yourself? Here's what most people miss. Reuben is not removed from the list. He is still a tribe. His name still appears in the camp, still appears in Numbers, still appears in Revelation. The failure was real, the consequence was real. But Reuben was not erased, he was just repositioned. Now, two brothers standing together, Simeon and Levi. Their story begins with their sister Dinah, who went out one day in Canaan and was violated by a man named Shechem, a prince, powerful enough that his father immediately came to negotiate a marriage. Jacob's sons agreed to the marriage, required circumcision as a condition. And then, on the third day, when the men of the city were in the most physical pain of their lives, Simeon and Levi walked in with swords. They killed every man in the city, every one. Jacob was horrified, not primarily because of the morality of it, though that horror was real, but because of the political exposure. "You have brought trouble on me," he told them, "by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land." Simeon and Levi looked back at their father with the particular calm of men who believed they had done the only right thing available. Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? It is hard to know what to do with them. On his deathbed, Jacob speaks over them with grief in his voice. "Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." Scattered, divided, punishment for rage. And then something extraordinary happens to Levi. At the foot of Mount Sinai, while Moses is still on the mountain receiving the law, Israel breaks the law. They build a golden calf. They throw off the God who split the sea for them and bow to something they made with their own hands. Moses comes down from the mountain and stands at the gate of the camp and shouts, "Who is on the Lord's side?" And the tribe of Levi, every man of them, steps forward. What had been a curse becomes a commission. The same fierce, consuming passion that burned a city to the ground is redirected toward holiness. God takes the anger and points it at idolatry. The tribe of violence becomes the tribe of priesthood. They are still scattered, but now they are scattered through every tribe as the servants of God, the teachers of the law, the keepers of the tabernacle. Their landlessness, which was a punishment, becomes a proclamation. The Lord himself is their inheritance. And then there is Judah, the fourth son, not first, not last, fourth, which in the logic of ancient succession means almost nothing. He has 3 older brothers ahead of him in line. He has no obvious claim to anything. And his personal history is not encouraging. He is the one who suggested selling Joseph into slavery rather than killing him, which he seems to have considered a mercy. He later sleeps with a woman he mistakes for a prostitute, who turns out to be his own daughter-in-law, Tamar, who was disguising herself to expose his injustice toward her. Judah is not a clean story. But something happens to Judah in Egypt. When Benjamin, the youngest, Rachel's last son, Jacob's most treasured child, is threatened with imprisonment, Judah steps forward. He offers himself instead. "Let me remain as a servant to my Lord in place of the boy." The man who once sold a brother now offers his own freedom to protect one. That is the moment Jacob sees. On his deathbed, the old man bypasses Reuben, bypasses Simeon, bypasses Levi, and stops at Judah. "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples." The name Judah in Hebrew is Yehudah, from the root yada, which means to throw the hands upward, to praise with the whole body. Leah gave him this name at his birth, at the moment she stopped asking Jacob to love her and started thanking God for what she had. She stopped striving. She lifted her hands, and in that posture of surrender, not victory, not vindication, just worship in the middle of an unresolved pain, she named the tribe that would carry the kings, the tribe that would carry David, the tribe that would carry Jesus. The scepter goes not to the strongest, not to the firstborn, not to the most impressive. It goes to the one who learned how to praise in the dark. There are 2 more sons of Leah, Zebulun and Issachar, the 5th and 6th, the quiet brothers, The ones who do not get dramatic stories or shocking reversals. No city burned, no scepter promised. Just two men doing two very different kinds of work, and both of them necessary. Zebulun settles by the sea. His tribe becomes the traders, the merchants, the men who move between worlds, Gentile coastlands and Israelite highlands, carrying goods in both directions. Jacob's blessing over him is brief. Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. Moses adds, Zebulun, rejoice in your going out. Going out, always moving. A tribe defined by departure and return, by the courage to cross borders that other tribes never reached. Issachar is different. Issachar sits down. Where Zebulun goes out, Issachar goes deep. The blessing calls him a strong donkey crouching between the sheepfolds, which sounds like an insult until you understand what it means. A donkey between the sheepfolds is not lazy, it is load-bearing. It carries what others cannot. It stays when others leave. And the Chronicles gives us one of the most quietly remarkable descriptions in the entire Old Testament. Among David's warriors, the men of Issachar are noted not for their fighting but for this. They understood the times and knew what Israel ought to do. In a list of soldiers, Issachar sends thinkers. 200 chiefs who read the moment correctly, who understood what hour it was in history, what decision was required, which direction the wind was turning before anyone else felt it move. Every generation needs Zebulons, people brave enough to go where the work is, and every generation needs Issachars, people still enough to understand what the moment requires. And this is where it gets remarkable, because when you step back and look at the 12 tribes together, not as territories on a map, but as postures of the human soul, a pattern begins to emerge. Reuben, raw potential, uncontrolled. Simeon and Levi, fierce passion redirected. Judah, shame transformed into praise. Zebulun, courage to cross borders. Issachar, wisdom to read the room. The tribes are not just 12 ethnic groups descending from one man. They are 12 different ways of being human before God. 12 different strengths that can become weaknesses. 12 different wounds that can become gifts. Philo of Alexandria, a Jewish philosopher who lived at the same time as Jesus, wrote that the 12 tribes represent the 12 capacities of the human soul. He was writing 2,000 years ago. He was not wrong. Before we go further, I want to pause and ask you something because this matters. Which of these tribes describes you most right now? Not who you want to be, but who you actually are in this season. If you feel like Judah, someone who has failed in ways that should have disqualified you, but you are still somehow standing, still somehow in the story, type the number 1 in the comments. If you feel more like Issachar, someone quietly watching, waiting, carrying weight in the background, trying to understand what this moment requires, type the number 2. I read every comment, and I want to know where you are, because the rest of this story is for both of you. Now we cross a line in the birth narrative. We leave the sons of Leah and enter the sons of the servant women, Zilpah and Bilhah, and then finally the sons of Rachel, the wife Jacob had worked 14 years to marry. These tribes do not carry the royal promise or the priestly calling, but they carry something else. They carry the stories of people who were never supposed to be at the center of things, and who ended up there anyway. Gad is Zilpah's firstborn. His name means good fortune or a troop, depending on which route you follow, and both meanings fit him. Jacob's blessing is almost military in its rhythm. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. Moses adds, Gad lives like a lion tearing at arm and scalp. A border tribe, literally and spiritually. The tribe of Gad settled east of the Jordan, outside the main territory of Israel, holding a frontier that nobody else wanted to hold. They were the ones who stood between the nation and what came from the wilderness. Every community has a God. The person holding the line, nobody thanks them for holding. the one who shows up at the edge where it is exposed and uncomfortable, and stays. Asher is the other son of Zilpah, and his story is almost the opposite of his brothers. Where Gad fights, Asher flourishes. Asher's food shall be rich, Jacob says. He shall yield royal delicacies. Moses echoes it. Most blessed of sons is Asher. Let him be the favorite of his brothers. The tribe of Asher settled along the Mediterranean coast, the lush, fertile strip of land where olive oil flowed and grain grew heavy. They supplied the palace kitchens. They fed the nation. There is a woman named Anna in the Gospel of Luke, a prophetess, 84 years old, who lived in the temple and fasted and prayed day and night, waiting for the redemption of Israel. When Mary and Joseph bring the infant Jesus to the temple, Anna is the one who sees him and begins to give thanks. Luke notes her tribal identity almost as an afterthought. She was from the tribe of Asher, the tribe of blessing, of abundance, of royal provision. And here at the end of her long, quiet, faithful life, the most blessed of all blessings walks into the room on his mother's arm, and she recognizes him before almost anyone else. Asher, the tribe that knew how to receive what God had prepared. Pay attention to this, because the next tribe, Dan, runs in almost the opposite direction. Dan is the son of Bilhah, Rachel's servant, and his name comes from the Hebrew din. He has judged, or he has vindicated. Rachel named him this in her grief, in her jealousy of Leah, as a declaration that God had finally seen her suffering and ruled in her favor. The tribe of Dan would grow into one of the largest in Israel. They would produce Samson, the most physically powerful man in Scripture, a man who could kill a lion with his bare hands, who could carry the gates of a city on his shoulders. Samson could not govern his own heart. He fell for a woman named Delilah, who was paid to find the secret of his strength. He told her. She told the Philistines. They took his eyes. And Samson, who was supposed to judge Israel, who was supposed to be the strong arm of God's justice, spent the last chapter of his life grinding grain in a Philistine prison, blind, humiliated, a spectacle. The tribe of Dan is the only tribe missing from the list of the sealed in Revelation chapter 7. Every other tribe is there. Dan is absent, replaced by Manasseh. The rabbis debated why for centuries. Most concluded it was because Dan became the center of idol worship in the northern kingdom. The tribe that carried the gift of judgment became the tribe that judged wrongly, that bowed to the wrong thing, that used its considerable strength in the wrong direction. But it gets stranger, because right next to Dan in the birth narrative is Naphtali, also a son of Bilhah. And Naphtali's name means my wrestling, or I have wrestled and won. Rachel named him in the middle of her competition with Leah, a wrestling match of the soul, fought through childbirth and tears and desperate prayers. Jacob's blessing over Naphtali is brief and beautiful, a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Moses adds, Naphtali, satisfied with favor, full of the blessing of the Lord, swift, free, fruitful. The tribe of Naphtali settled in the north, around the Sea of Galilee. Matthew records that when Jesus began his ministry, after John was arrested, after the darkness started to close in, he withdrew to Galilee and began to preach in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, the ancient region of wrestling and freedom, the land of the doe set free. Matthew quotes Isaiah, "The people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light." The light came first to Naphtali. Now we reach Joseph, and the story changes weight entirely. Joseph is Rachel's firstborn, the dreamer, the boy who saw the sun and moon and 11 stars bowing to him and made the fatal error of telling his brothers about it over breakfast. His brothers, including Judah, who had not yet become the man he would become, sold him to Ishmaelite traders for 20 pieces of silver. He was 17 years old. He arrived in Egypt as a slave, was falsely accused by his master's wife, was thrown in prison, was forgotten by the man he helped, and spent years in a cell he had done nothing to deserve. And then Pharaoh dreamed. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in his Antiquities of the Jews, notes that Joseph's administrative capacity was recognized immediately by the Egyptian court, that his ability to read systems, to see patterns, to plan for catastrophe before it arrived, marked him as extraordinary, even by the standards of a civilization that had been building pyramids for 1,000 years. Pharaoh put him in charge of everything, second in command over all of Egypt at the age of 30. Joseph named his sons in Egypt. His firstborn he called Manasseh. God has made me forget my hardship. His second he called Ephraim, from the Hebrew root para. To be fruitful, he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Fruitful in the land of suffering, not after leaving it, not once it was over, in it, while it was still happening. Jacob gave Joseph a double portion, the firstborn's blessing, split between Ephraim and Manasseh, 2 tribes instead of 1. Ephraim became the dominant tribe of the northern kingdom. Joshua, who led Israel into the promised land, was from Ephraim. Deborah, the judge and prophet who led Israel's army when the men would not, fought her battle in Ephraim's hills. And last, because Jacob insisted on it, because he was saved for last the way the best wine is, there is Benjamin. Benjamin is Rachel's second son. His birth killed her. She named him, with her last breath, Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow. Jacob immediately renamed him Benjamin, son of my right hand. The same child, 2 names, one from a mother dying in pain, one from a father refusing to let grief be the final word. Jacob's blessing over Benjamin is unsettling. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he divides the spoil. The smallest tribe, the fiercest heart. Saul, the first king of Israel, tall and impressive and ultimately tragic, was a Benjaminite. And then, centuries later, a man named Saul of Tarsus, trained as a Pharisee, burning with the kind of zeal that had once made Levi reach for a sword, encountered a light on a road to Damascus that knocked him off his horse. He got up as Paul. The ravenous wolf became the apostle of grace. The man who had spent his life devouring the church began building it, letter by letter, city by city, prison by prison. He wrote more of the New Testament than anyone else, and he never stopped calling himself a Benjaminite. I am a Hebrew of Hebrews, he wrote to the Philippians, of the tribe of Benjamin. He wore the name like a flag. Here is what happens to the 12 tribes when the real testing begins. The book of Judges is the stress test. Moses is gone. Joshua is gone. The generation that crossed the Jordan and watched the walls of Jericho fall is gone. And now, the tribes are on their own, 12 separate peoples in one land, with a God they keep forgetting and enemies who never do. Deborah, the prophetess and judge, calls the tribes to war. A Canaanite general named Sisera has oppressed Israel for 20 years. She sends word to every tribe. Some come, some do not. Zebulun comes, Naphtali comes. Issachar rides with Deborah into the valley, but others, Reuben, Gilead, Dan, Asher, stay home. And in the ancient poem that records the battle, called the Song of Deborah, there is a line of quiet devastation about the village of Meroz, which was near the battlefield and sent no one. Curse Meroz, says the angel of the Lord. Curse its inhabitants bitterly, because they did not come to the help of the Lord against the mighty. They did not come. In every generation, in every crisis, there are tribes that show up and tribes that do not. The tribes that do not show up are not destroyed. They are just less. Smaller in the end than they could have been, carrying the quiet weight of the moment they sat down when the moment required them to stand. Here's the part nobody tells you. The tribe with the most complicated story, the tribe of Levi, the tribe born out of violence, cursed to be scattered, the tribe that had no land because their father's dying word over them was judgment, this tribe becomes the one God calls closest to himself. At Sinai, when the nation collapsed into idolatry at the foot of the mountain they had just promised to obey, It was Levi who stepped forward. And God took that step, that one act of choosing holiness when everything around them was choosing the golden calf, and built an entire calling out of it. The Levites became the priests, the singers, the teachers, the ones who carried the ark, the ones who stood between the people and the presence of God. They were not given land because God said something to them that He has said in different ways to every person who has ever felt they had nothing left. I am your portion. I am your inheritance. When everything else is divided among the others, I am what remains for you, and I am enough. Eusebius of Caesarea, writing in his ecclesiastical history in the 4th century, notes that the Jewish community maintained careful tribal genealogies well into the 1st century, that the identity of being a Levite, a Benjaminite, a member of the tribe of Judah was not abstract history, but living identity. People still knew who they were and where they came from, because those names still meant something. And then comes Revelation. John is on the island of Patmos, a volcanic rock in the Aegean Sea, exiled there by the Roman Emperor Domitian because the gospel he preached was considered a threat to the empire. He is old. He is alone. He is the last of the 12 apostles still living because all the others died for what they believed. And in a vision that breaks every category he has, he is shown the end of the age, the sealing of 144,000 servants of God, 12,000 from each tribe. The names are there: Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. The tribes are still there, at the end of history. After everything, the failures, the idolatries, the civil wars, the Assyrian conquest that scattered 10 tribes into the ancient world and buried their names in silence, they are still there, sealed, known, counted, not one of them forgotten. And then John sees the city, the new Jerusalem descending out of heaven like a bride, walls of jasper, foundations of sapphire and emerald, streets of gold so pure it looks like glass, and 12 gates, one on each side of the city, 3 to the north, 3 to the south, 3 to the east, 3 to the west. And on each gate, a name, the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. The gates are never shut. The text is explicit about this. Its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there. The city stands open forever, and the door you walk through to enter, the gate that welcomes you into the place where every wound is healed and every name is restored, bears the name of one of these 12 broken, magnificent, complicated, redeemed families. The tribes were not erased by their failures. They were written into eternity. 3 things before you go. The first is this: every tribe began in pain. Leah's tears, Rachel's longing, a dying father's trembling hands reaching toward 12 imperfect sons. God did not wait for a perfect family to build His nation. He started with a man who lied to his blind father, married sisters who competed their whole lives, fathered children through 4 different women, and spent 20 years grieving a son he assumed was dead. He started there, and he built something that still stands. The second is for you personally. You are not just one tribe. You carry Reuben's instability on your worst days. You carry Judah's shame on your honest ones. You carry Issachar's quiet weight when nobody sees what you're holding. The question the tribes ask is not which one you are. It is which posture you choose today. Reuben chose appetite. Levi chose presence. Judah chose to offer himself when it cost him something. Every morning is a choosing. And the third, the one I want you to carry out of this video. Levi had no land, no inheritance, no territory to call his own. Every other tribe received a portion. Levi received a scattering. And into that emptiness, God spoke the most staggering thing He could have said. I am your inheritance, not a place, not a portion of Canaan, me. When everything has been stripped away, the title, the firstborn blessing, the territory you thought was yours, Sometimes what remains is the only thing that was ever real. If this opened something in you today, I would love to know. Which tribe hit you hardest? Tell me in the comments below. And if you want to keep going deeper into the stories most people rush past, subscribe and share this with someone who needs it. There is more where this came from. 12 names, 12 wounds, and every single one of them written on a gate that will never close.